This one's gonna be a mess, ladies and gents. Fulgrim starts at the top of the mountain and proceeds to have a downward trend like a hot dog cart pushed off the precipice of the Grand Canyon. Most of the Primarchs that fell to chaos get a cool gimmick, but Fulgrim, on the other hand, just got gross. I don't mean gross at face value like Mortarion, I mean gross in relation to the moral decay of one's soul. This sucks for a ton of reasons, but mostly because once upon a time, this was my favorite Primarch. A compulsive need for perfectionism, fueled by gnawing thoughts of never living up to the image you've put forth into the world, describes the majority of my life. So you can take it to the bank that there's nobody more furious than I am that they took all of these layers and condensed them into a delusional purple snake man. It's like watching the story of Darth Maul if he stayed the insane human scrap metal spider amalgamation as opposed to undergoing character growth. You might want a drink for you on this one, because Lord knows I got mine ready. Cheers. If you had to conjure up Fulgrim from a recipe, it would be 3 cups perfection, 2 cups insecurity, then, I don't know, like an egg or some shit. Fulgrim would reach adolescence upon the world of Chemos, which was effectively a giant coal mine covered with carcinogenic clouds. As Fulgrim grew, he did what he does best. Literally everything. Reverse engineering air purifiers, erecting, building a thriving metropolis, designing beautiful architecture. He really took that place from the outhouse to the penthouse in no time flat. He not only made the entire planet habitable, he made it perfect. This is a word we will be using a lot today. It is entirely accurate to say Fulgrim's 2 most defining traits are being perfect, and I shit you not, being the sexiest being in the galaxy. That is canonically accurate. At least that was the case until dipshit turned himself into a purple reptile. Fulgrim's leadership turned that shitty little pebble and all of its surrounding planets into diamonds, and that made enough waves to get the Emperor's attention. The reunion with his father was rather standard, no real bumps in the road there. The problem came when he received his legion. A normal amount of Space Marines on the return of their Primarch would usually number in the thousands or tens of thousands. Fulgrim received 200. Despite this, the address that he would give to his 200 sons would have the Emperor immediately bestow the title of the Emperor's Children upon the Legion. He then gave them, and only them, permission to use the very same eagle that adorned his armor on their own. This is often glossed over, but it shows how truly hopeful and downright proud of Fulgrim the Emperor really was. In case you're wondering why the low numbers, if something happens to the genetic material that was taken from a demigod to make you superhuman, you can't really make any more members to add to your ranks. We don't know the exact details of the matter, but one giant explosion on a spaceship and a blight later, they have next to nothing in numbers in terms of replenishing ranks. This would result in them being babysat and working together with Horus's legion, the Lunar Wolves, until they were pulled from the depths of oblivion. It's worth noting there was no real animosity from Fulgrim toward the Emperor because of this. Fulgrim just recognized it as the unfortunate coincidence it was and actually enjoyed working with Horus. When the Legion finally bounced back, it became the public face of this whole operation. Fulgrim felt as if excellence was a necessity in every aspect of his Legion. For anyone else, this would be a crushing task, but for him, it was as natural as breathing. When you needed hands shaken and babies kissed, you sent Fulgrim. When you wanted the historians of a planet to speak of your legacy as opposed to brutality, you sent Fulgrim. Stories detailing the beauty and magnificence of the Empire would be sung from the highest rooftops when the Primarch of Perfection arrived on your planet. Gods amongst men would descend from ornate battleships cloaked in royal purple, decorated with golden trim. Even those who fought the Emperor's children still bore witness to a beautiful dance of blades and bullets weaving across the battlefield. Now, we can't talk about Fulgrim without talking about his best buddy, Ferrus. Everybody loved Fulgrim. Hell, even Conrad enjoyed his company, and Conrad doesn't like shit. Sometimes he did ruffle feathers, but that's because a lot of his brothers are socially inept and cannot discriminate jest from condescension. But there was no brother who adored him more than Ferrus Manus. These two quite literally forged their bond in friendship upon meeting one another. Ferrus was a forge master, and Fulgrim was an artisan, so a challenge was issued. They would both create a weapon to determine who was the best. After several months of effort, it was finally time to present their work. Ferrus had crafted a brilliant blade that resonated an eternal flame, and Fulgrim fashioned a glorious warhammer that exuded sheer strength. The brothers then declared in unison that the other was the victor and gifted their weapons to their competitor, beginning a legendary friendship. I will be making an entire video dedicated to their exploits. I'll provide one example now. Fulgrim is actually responsible for Ferrus's nickname being the Gorgon. Typically, being referred to as a grotesque monster would be a great offense, but Ferrus held it near and dear to his heart as it was an inside joke with Fulgrim. Sanguinius arrived from his home planet and, being quite the artisan himself, brought several cargo holds worth of fine art. As Fulgrim was filled with glee because he had another brother who appreciated such things, he noticed Ferrus scowling in the corner. When he questioned his brother's grimace, Ferrus responded along the lines of, "Art is a waste of our time." Fulgrim remarked back along the lines of, "Brother, you're just fucking terrible sometimes, you know that?" To which the ever-dour Ferrus was unable to hold back a grin. Also, this is only loosely related, but can fanfiction writers not be themselves? These are two brothers. Stop trying to make it weird. At this point, you could ask yourself why I despise him so, because he seems like a pretty great guy. Well, my friend, the rest of the video will show you. God damn it, I hate everything past this point. So, there's this planet called Laren, and it had some broke-back aliens that worshipped the chaos god of excess, Slaanesh. Hey, maybe that's the hint given to the character. You need to slam an excess of malt liquor to tolerate her existence. Don't look into Slaanesh, I'll give you the short notes. Someone who needs their hard drive checked made an omnipotent being dedicated to any and all things that would put someone on the registry. Unfortunately, whoever was writing this into Warhammer history was not crushed by a falling piano before it went to publishing, so it exists now. And because it exists, and all of the other Chaos Gods got a Primarch, Slaanesh got one too. I don't see why we couldn't pawn it off on some worthless one like Lorgar or Mortarion, but whatever. Back to this worthless, god-forsaken planet. Hold on. The only good that came from the following battle was the extinction of this pimp-loving cult species. However, the consequence was that vile purple bitch getting her hooks into our boy. And while we're at it, screw the Emperor for not informing one of his best sons, as a matter of fact, the son he chose to name the Emperor's children after, that he had to watch out for this kind of danger. Fulgrim found himself in a temple, at the center of which was an ornate blade that, unbeknownst to Fulgrim, housed a demon. That demon would begin poisoning his mind and body, priming him to be one of the first to turn over to chaos with Horus. It was disastrous to the point that Fulgrim stopped using the sword that Ferrus had gifted him in preference to this new blade. Nearly every thought he had believed his own was actually the machinations of the demon manipulating his psyche. The jovial, fun-loving nature he once had was stripped away from him. In its stead, an ever-growing obsession with self-importance and superiority. When Horus would finally show his hand, Fulgrim was one of the first brothers to join his cause in betraying the Emperor. I don't know exactly how I'm going to phrase the rest of this, but there's likely going to be more expletives. If that is something you dislike, I apologize. In what is generally considered the first battle of this galactic civil war, Fulgrim would face off with his loving brother, Ferrus Manus. In a heart-wrenching duel that left nobody happy, Ferrus would taste the wrath of the demon-enslaved Fulgrim. They all but matched one another in the plains of Istvan, each blow answered by an equally devastating retort. Fulgrim, as one of the best duelists currently alive, would gain the upper hand when he unsheathed the possessed blade. Disarming Ferrus, he would raise his hand for the killing strike, but could not bring himself to slay his best friend. In this moment, he would realize every last word he believed was a lie. Horus had deceived him. The blade had a mind of its own, and it had been exerting its control over him. This was his most beloved brother, and surrounding them were the corpses of their loyal sons. What the fuck was he doing? For the first time since grabbing that blade, he was able to see things clearly and refused its temptation toward evil. Unfortunately, the demon had long since prepared for this moment. Fulgrim could do nothing but watch as the demon forced his hand down, decapitating his brother. In this moment of agony, the demon would seize control of the Primarch's body, imprisoning him within his own mind. Yeah, it's about that time again. Not only do I have to talk about the downfall of what was once my favorite Primarch, I also need to give credit to Lorgar for being a real one at this point. Can you understand why I hate this? Lorgar noticed in this big roundtable meeting with all the traders that something was very different about his brother. While everyone was busy talking, he grabbed his mace and uppercut the ever-loving fuck out of the demon that was puppeteering Fulgrim. He let everyone know that this was not the brother they once knew. Instead, it was just some creature wearing his face. Honestly, I consider this Lorgar's greatest moment. Horus would command everyone but the two brothers to leave the meeting, and Lorgar genuinely tore into him. He was made aware that Horus had known about this possession the whole time and simply allowed it to happen. Lorgar held back Horus while he screamed at the demon, radiating a psychic rage. That day, he would swear to discover the origins of this demon and obliterate its very existence. Fuck it. Good job, Lorgar. Honestly. Good on you. Screw it. And you know what? With that, we'll just... Apparently, we're able to find out in not too long of a time that this shitbird was only temporarily under the demon's control, and he used that time to learn all about the Chaos God's offers. So not only has old Jimmy Jackoff here been completely in control for 80% of the horrors committed, but he has also decided he wants to work for the demon's boss instead of fighting its influence. Right about now is where all of your compassion for this man should die. Fulgrim convinced Perturabo to come with him on a fetch quest for what he purported as a weapon of great importance in defeating the Emperor. Well, wouldn't you know who won the pony, it was actually all a ruse. Fulgrim lured Perturabo into the depths of an ancient temple and began a ritual that sapped the life from the Lord of Iron. If it weren't for the intervention of the Warhammer equivalent to the Inglorious Bastards, Fulgrim would have drank every last ounce of life from his brother and probably developed into the most powerful Primarch without peer. Instead, he got his head crushed with a hammer, and his fate was listed as to be determined. When it came to the Siege of Terra, the final battle of the Civil War, Fulgrim would appear as a massive purple snake monster man. At this point, him and his legion both suck at everything they do. They've pretty much devolved themselves into the sex offender shuffle. They can't pay attention, they can't cooperate worth a damn, and they're kind of okay one-on-one, but not really because they get washed 99% of the time. So the only thing of note that's born out of the entire ordeal on their end is Rogel Dorn kicking Fulgrim's teeth in. Despite having previously been an amazing swordsman that could go as far as a stalemate in training with Lionel Johnson, he sucks now. He just sits there and lets himself get punched in the face over and over and over again while he makes fun of a guy who has, at most, 3 emotions. In the future, Dorn would allude to the possibility of Fulgrim killing him if he actually tried, but that doesn't really matter now, does it? Because he didn't. Fulgrim lets himself get punched in the head repeatedly, then decides the siege wasn't fun enough anymore and wants to go home. I guess we can just fast forward to him killing Guilliman, because that's the last thing he did worth talking about apart from fingering demons. And no, I'm not kidding. That's a thing he did. Seriously, who is responsible for writing this shit? So, like I said, him and Guilliman face off, and for some reason the following happens. Guilliman, the man who can be blown over by a strong cough, fights one of the best duelists in the galaxy. Naturally, with all of his plot armor, you would think this was a guaranteed free win to build him some real credibility, some much-needed credibility at that. Nope, he gets his throat slit and dies. Yep, that's just the way she goes, I guess. Now, he did manage to get revived 10,000 years later, and during that whole time of an undefended galaxy, Fulgrim busied himself doing jack shit. Explain to me how this man has achieved massive accomplishments in killing a fellow Primarch twice, and both parties end up looking worse than they had going in. And, well, that's about it for him. Last we checked, he was still doing relatively nothing out in the Warhammer version of hell. Oh, and there's a clone of him, but it's also evil and stuck in a museum run by a Terminator Pharaoh Indiana Jones named Trazen. Don't worry, that's going to make sense someday. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Fulgrim that I detest down to the very marrow in my bones. No matter how much I make fun of Morty for being smelly, or Lorgar for being a nerd, this one is the worst. If you enjoy current day Fulgrim, I don't know why you are the way that you are, but I advise you not to be for the legal implications that it assumes. With that, I bid you good health and a good night. Thanks for watching. Jesus, I gotta piss.